All right, so I think everyone listening to this is probably at least a little bit curious about international business, right? Like, how do companies even begin to compete on a global scale?
Oh, it's definitely a fascinating world. So many moving parts.
Absolutely. So, to help us break it all down, we're diving into chapter 8 of this business textbook, all about competitive strategy.
And by the end of this, you'll be able to analyze companies and industries like a pro. See those hidden forces at play.
Love it. So, the chapter kicks off by laying out three levels of strategy: corporate, business, and operational.
Yeah, it's important to distinguish those, right? Make sure we're all on the same page.
Totally. Corporate strategy is that big picture thinking, which industries to be in, mergers, acquisitions, that sort of thing. But today, we're all about business strategy.
How to win within a specific industry. You've chosen your playing field, now how do you dominate?
Exactly. And operational strategy, that's more about the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty of making it all work.
Efficiency, processes, all that good stuff. But yeah, today it's all about that business strategy. How do you carve out your space and thrive?
Okay, I'm ready to get strategic. Where do we even begin?
Well, one of the most powerful tools we have, honestly, is Porter's Five Forces. This framework, it's gold.
Porter's Five Forces. I've heard of it, but refresh my memory. What's the gist?
So imagine you're, I don't know, thinking of starting a business, right? Before you jump in, you want to know, how tough is it going to be to actually make money in this market?
Yeah, makes sense. Do your due diligence.
Exactly. So Porter's Five Forces, they help us analyze the profit potential of an industry.
Mhm.
And the first force, it's the rivalry among competitors.
So basically, how much competition am I going to be up against?
That's it. Other tons of players,
Mhm.
just a few big ones. Is everyone constantly undercutting each other on price? That kind of thing.
Gotcha. So intense rivalry, that's usually a bad sign for profits.
Oh, generally, yeah. Hard to stand out, hard to command premium prices when everyone's fighting for the same slice of the pie.
Okay, what's the next force we got to worry about?
The threat of new entrants. So you've got your business going, you think you've found your niche, but then boom, suddenly there are all these new companies popping up.
Stepping on your toes.
Exactly. And how easy is it for them to enter the market? If there are low barriers to entry, you're constantly going to be looking over your shoulder.
So you'd want some barriers to entry, ways to make it tough for those newcomers to muscle in?
Absolutely. Think like high startup costs, strict regulations, things like that. Anything that makes it harder for new competition to just appear out of nowhere.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got rivalry, we've got the threat of new entrants.
Right.
What else is lurking out there to threaten our profits?
The threat of substitutes. This one can be sneaky.
Substitutes, meaning like alternative products or services that could kind of do the same job as yours.
You got it. So maybe you've got a great product, everyone loves it, but then a new technology comes along that makes your product obsolete. Or maybe there's a cheaper way to achieve the same outcome.
Ouch, that's got to be tough to anticipate sometimes, right? The world's changing so fast.
It is. It's all about being aware of those potential disruptors and thinking, okay, how vulnerable am I to being replaced?
Okay, makes sense. So we've covered three forces: rivalry, new entrants, substitutes. What about the last two?
Those are all about leverage. So think about it this way. Every business relies on suppliers, right? The companies that provide them with the materials, the components, whatever they need to operate.
Yeah, I got it, the raw materials.
Right. But what if there are only a few suppliers who control something essential? That gives them a lot of bargaining power. They can charge you more, dictate terms, and you might not have much choice.
So it's not just about competition from other businesses, it's about the power dynamics within your whole supply chain.
Exactly. And the same logic applies to your customers.
If you're relying on just a few big clients, they can basically call the shots, right?
Exactly. It's all about who has more leverage in the relationship. If you've got tons of customers all vying for your product, you're in a stronger position. But if you're dependent on just a few big buyers, they can really squeeze your margins.
It's like a constant tug of war, isn't it? Trying to maintain that balance of power. So these five forces, they're always at play, shaping the competitive landscape.
That's the key takeaway. And the chapter does a really good job of illustrating this with the example of McDonald's.
McDonald's, I wouldn't have thought of them as a particularly strategic company, but
Well, think about it. They face intense rivalry from other fast food chains. New food trucks are popping up all over, and they're at the mercy of huge suppliers like Coca-Cola who provide their, secret syrup.
never thought of it that way. So even a giant like McDonald's has to constantly navigate these forces.
Absolutely. No one is immune. And, it's worth noting that even this model, as powerful as it is It has its limitations.
Okay, interesting. What are some of the criticisms of Porter's five forces?
Well, some argue that it's a bit too static. It provides a snapshot of the industry in a moment in time. But the world's changing so fast.
Right, it can't predict the future.
Exactly. And it doesn't always account for the potential for collaboration. Sometimes companies can actually benefit from working with each other, even if they're technically competitors.
That's true, those lines are blurring all the time these days. Okay, so we've got a good grasp on the forces shaping an industry, but once a company understands that, what's next? How do they actually choose how to compete?
Well, that's where Porter's other big contribution comes in, his generic strategies. He basically laid out three classic options.
Lay 'em on me. I'm ready to strategize.
Okay, so option one is cost leadership. Aim to be the cheapest producer in the market. Attract customers who are super price sensitive.
Like I'm thinking Walmart, budget airlines, those kinds of players.
Exactly. It's all about efficiency, scale, keeping those costs down so you can offer the lowest prices.
All right, cost leadership. Got it. What's the next option?
Differentiation. This is about offering something unique that customers are willing to pay a premium for.
So like luxury brands, high-tech gadgets, anything that screams special or exclusive?
Yeah, could be about superior quality, innovative features, a strong brand image, anything that sets you apart.
So you're not competing on price. You're competing on like desirability.
Exactly. You're giving people a reason to choose you, even if you're not the cheapest option. And then the third option is focus.
Focus, meaning like narrowing your target market.
Exactly. So you could be the cost leader within a very specific niche, like maybe you're the cheapest grocery store in a particular neighborhood.
Or you could differentiate within that niche, right? Like a boutique that only sells vintage clothing from a specific era.
That's it. So you're not trying to be everything to everyone. You're laser focused on a specific customer group.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together, but I gotta ask, can a company successfully blend these strategies, like offer good quality at a reasonable price?
Ah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Porter initially argued that you got to pick one and stick to it. He called it the stuck-in-the-middle principle.
Stuck in the middle, meaning you're not really excelling at anything.
Exactly. You're not the cheapest, you're not the most differentiated, so who are you? But these days, we see a lot of companies trying to do both.
Yeah, like who doesn't love a good deal on something that's also high quality?
Right. It's tempting. But it's a tough balancing act. Some pull it off brilliantly, others, not so much.
I bet. It makes you wonder, has stuck in the middle become less of a risk and more of a strategy in itself?
That's an interesting thought. Maybe in today's world, being able to straddle those lines is a competitive advantage, something to ponder. But, I feel like we're only looking at one side of the coin here.
What do you mean?
We've talked a lot about external forces, the competitive landscape. But what about a company's internal strengths? What about what they bring to the table?
Ah, right. Their own unique assets and capabilities. That's got to be a huge part of the equation, too.
Huge. And that's where the resource-based view, or RBV, comes in. It shifts the focus inwards.
So while Porter's five forces are about navigating the external environment, RBV is about leveraging what you have within your own walls.
Exactly. What makes you unique? What do you do better than anyone else?
I like it. So it's not just about surviving the onslaught of competition. It's about harnessing your own superpower.
Exactly. And to really understand those superpowers, we have the VRIO framework.
VRIO. That sounds vaguely familiar. Break it down for me.
Stands for valuable, rare, inimitable, and organized. For a resource to give a company a lasting advantage, it has to tick all these boxes.
Okay, let's go through those one by one. Valuable, I get that. It has to be something that actually benefits the company, right? Helps them make money, operate better, something like that.
Exactly. If it's not adding value, it's not a competitive advantage, then it needs to be rare. If everyone has access to the same resources, no one has an edge.
Right, it's got to be something special. So what about inimitable? That sounds pretty powerful.
It is. This is about whether competitors can easily copy what you're doing. If they can, any advantage you have is short-lived.
Makes sense. So it could be due to patents, unique skills within the company, a strong brand reputation, things like that.
All of those.
Right.
And finally, organized. Even if you have something valuable, rare, and inimitable, you need to be structured to actually use it effectively.
So you need the right systems, the right processes, the right people in place to leverage those strengths. It's like having a Ferrari but not knowing how to drive it.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the chapter uses Dell as a great example here. They have this unique combination of a direct-to-customer model an efficient supply chain, a build-to-order system.
Yeah, they really revolutionized the PC market back in the day.
They did, and it was because they had those valuable, rare, inimitable, and well-organized resources.
So they had the secret sauce, and they knew how to use it. That's a winning combination. Okay, so we've got external forces, we've got internal strengths, and it seems like the best strategy isn't one size fits all, right?
Exactly. It depends on the industry. It depends on the company's specific resources. There are a lot of factors at play.
So how do companies even begin to choose the right approach? Where do they go from here?
Well, that's where we get into another fascinating area of competitive strategy, figuring out whether to focus on positioning, leveraging, or opportunity. But that's a topic for another time.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. We'll have to pick this up in part 2 of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it. Until then, start thinking about the companies you admire. What are their unique strengths? How are they navigating this complex landscape? Lots to ponder.
Great advice. We'll be back soon to explore those strategies in more depth. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's pick up right where we left off. You were about to tell me about these positioning, leveraging, and opportunity approaches. What's all that about?
Right. Well, remember how we were talking about how the business world is constantly changing?
Yeah, it feels like things are moving at warp speed these days.
Exactly. So positioning is kind of like, you found your sweet spot in a stable industry and you want to fortify it. Build a moat around your castle.
Okay, I can picture that. So, who would be a good example of a company that's nailed the positioning game?
Think of Coca-Cola. I mean, they built this incredible brand distribution network. It's like they're practically untouchable.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine anyone seriously challenging their dominance at this point.
Right. But then you've got industries where things are a bit more dynamic.
Yeah, more in flux, like the tech world, for example.
Exactly. And that's where leveraging comes in. These companies, they're constantly evolving their core resources, trying to stay one step ahead of the curve.
So they're not just defending their position, they're actively shaping the future.
Exactly. Think of a company like, say, Toyota. They're always investing in new technologies, new manufacturing processes. They're not letting themselves get complacent.
So they're not just reacting to change, they're anticipating it.
Exactly. And then you've got opportunity. This is for those companies that thrive in really unpredictable environments.
Okay, so they're more agile, ready to pounce when they see a gap in the market.
That's it. It's almost like they're surfers, riding the waves of change, always looking for that perfect opportunity.
That's a great analogy. So I'm guessing a company like Tesla would fall into that opportunity category.
Absolutely. They're constantly innovating, disrupting, rewriting the rules. It's all about speed and agility in a landscape that's constantly shifting.
So these three approaches, positioning, leveraging, opportunity, are they kind of like pure strategies, or do companies usually blend them in some way?
That's a great question. In reality, you rarely see a company that's purely one or the other. It's often a mix, depending on their specific circumstances and the industry they're in.
So it's more about understanding these different approaches and then adapting them to fit your own unique situation.
It's exactly. Competitive strategy, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It's about making smart choices based on a deep understanding of your company, your market, and the forces at play.
Makes sense. So we've talked about these different approaches, but I feel like there's still a piece missing here. How do companies actually build the capabilities they need to compete effectively?
That's where we get into the exciting world of dynamic capabilities. And this is something that's becoming increasingly important in today's fast-paced world.
Dynamic capabilities. Okay, lay it on me. What are those all about?
Well, it's not enough for a company to just have great products or a loyal customer base anymore. Things are changing too fast. You got to be able to adapt, evolve, constantly reinvent yourself.
It's like you can't just sit back and relax once you've reached the top. You got to keep pushing, keep innovating, or someone else will overtake you.
Exactly. And that's what dynamic capabilities are all about. It's that ability to sense what's coming, to change direction quickly, to experiment, to learn, to constantly refine your approach.
So it's almost like a meta capability, right? It's the ability to build and adapt other capabilities as needed.
Exactly. You're not just good at one thing. You're good at getting good at things. It's about being agile, proactive, and constantly learning and adapting to new challenges.
This kind of reminds me of how we talked about companies blending those different competitive strategies, like combining cost, leadership, and differentiation. Are dynamic capabilities kind of what allow them to do that, to walk that tightrope?
You got it. Dynamic capabilities. They're the secret sauce that makes it all possible. They're what allows companies to experiment with different approaches, to pivot when things aren't working, to constantly refine their strategy in response to the market.
Okay, so it's all about being flexible and responsive. But can you give me a real-world example of a company that's like really good at this, that's really mastered the art of dynamic capabilities?
Think about Netflix. I mean, they're constantly gathering data on user preferences, using that to personalize recommendations, develop new content. It's like they've got their finger on the pulse of what people want.
Yeah, they're not just reacting to trends, they're shaping them. It's impressive.
Right. And they're constantly experimenting with new formats, new genres, new ways to engage their audience. They're not afraid to take risks, to try things that haven't been done before.
It sounds like they've built this incredible culture of innovation and experimentation.
They have.
Hmm.
And that's not an accident. It's a deliberate choice. They've invested in the systems, the processes, the people, the culture that allows them to be so agile and responsive.
So it's not just about having a brilliant CEO or a team of geniuses. It's about having that organizational structure, that mindset that allows innovation to thrive.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where people feel empowered to experiment, to take risks, to challenge the status quo.
Okay, so Netflix is a great example of a company that's really nailed this dynamic capabilities thing. But what about companies that haven't? Are there any cautionary tales out there?
Oh, absolutely. Remember Blockbuster?
Oh, yeah, the video rental giant. What happened to them again?
They failed to adapt to the rise of streaming. They clung to their old business model for too long, and, well, we all know how that story ends.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a reminder that even the biggest, most successful companies can fall if they don't stay ahead of the curve.
It's a harsh lesson, but an important one. In today's world, standing still is the same as falling behind.
So dynamic capabilities, they're not just a nice to have, they're a matter of survival.
You got it. And remember, it's not something you can just buy off the shelf. You have to build them, cultivate them, nurture them within your organization. It takes time, it takes effort, but it's absolutely essential for long-term success.
So it's like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And it's a muscle that every company needs to be flexing in today's world.
Okay, so we've established that dynamic capabilities are crucial in this fast-paced business environment. But, the world's not getting any smaller, right? Companies are increasingly operating on a global scale, so how do they manage those complexities while also staying agile and adaptable?
Great question. That takes us into the world of international capabilities, which is basically how companies adapt their dynamic capabilities to compete on a global stage.
International capabilities. Okay, this is starting to feel like a whole other can of worms.
It is complex, for sure,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly fascinating. As companies expand globally, they encounter a whole new set of challenges and opportunities. Different cultures, different markets, different ways of doing business.
Yeah, it's like they're playing on a whole new chessboard with different rules and different pieces.
Exactly, and the stakes are even higher. So companies need to figure out how to adapt their dynamic capabilities to thrive in this global arena.
So it's not just about being agile and adaptable, it's about being agile and adaptable in a globally minded way.
You got it. And one of the biggest mistakes companies make is assuming that what worked in their home market will automatically work in other countries.
Yeah, you can't just take a cookie cutter approach to global expansion, right?
Exactly. Different cultures have different needs, different preferences, different ways of doing things. You got to be sensitive to those nuances.
It's like you wouldn't wear the same outfit to a wedding and a funeral, right? You got to dress for the occasion.
Exactly. And it's not just about adapting to different cultural norms and consumer preferences. You also got to understand the institutional context of each market.
Meaning, like, the regulations, the laws, the political climate.
All of that. And the level of economic development, the infrastructure, the availability of skilled labor. It's a complex web of factors that companies need to navigate.
So it's like, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. But you also got to understand why the Romans do what they do.
That's a great way to put it. Companies need to do their homework, really understand the nuances of each market before they jump in.
Okay, so we've got the cultural piece, the institutional piece. What other challenges do companies face when they go global?
Well, there's a whole question of what capabilities to keep in-house and what to outsource. This is a strategic decision with a lot of implications.
Right, it's about finding that balance between efficiency and control.
Exactly. And there's no easy answer. Some companies are more comfortable outsourcing, while others prefer to keep their core competencies tightly controlled. It really depends on the industry, the company's specific circumstances, and their risk tolerance.
It's like a lot to juggle.
It is. And then on top of all that, you've got the challenge of managing global supply chains.
Which I imagine has gotten even more complicated in recent years with all the, pandemics and geopolitical instability and everything else going on.
You're telling me. Companies need to have really robust systems in place to make sure their products are getting where they need to be, when they need to be there, while also mitigating all sorts of potential risks.
So it's like a giant global game of chess, constantly trying to anticipate the next move and stay one step ahead.
That's a great analogy. And the chessboard is constantly changing, with new players emerging, old alliances shifting, and the rules of the game evolving. It's definitely not for the faint of heart.
Okay, so we've covered Porter's 5 forces, dynamic capabilities, international capabilities. This is a lot to take in. But I feel like we're missing one final piece of the puzzle.
What's that?
Innovation. We've talked about adapting and responding to change, but what about driving change? What about creating those game-changing products and services that disrupt entire industries?
You're right. Innovation. That's the magic ingredient that can really propel a company to the next level.
And that, my friend, is where we'll pick up in part 3 of our deep dive. Stay tuned. All right, so we're back, ready to tackle the final frontier of competitive strategy, innovation. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it really mean in the context of, actually competing and winning in the marketplace?
Yeah, innovation is it's almost become a buzzword, right? But when we're talking about competitive strategy, we're talking about innovation that actually moves the needle.
So it's not just about being new for the sake of being new. It's got to be new in a way that actually matters, that gives you an edge.
Exactly. And that's where the strategic part comes in. Companies need to be smart about what kind of innovation they're pursuing. It's got to align with their goals, their resources, their overall strategy.
Okay, I'm following you. So let's break down this whole innovation thing a bit. What different types are we even talking about here?
Well, one way to think about it is the impact on the market. You've got incremental innovation, which is basically making small, gradual improvements to existing products or processes.
So like the iPhone 14 versus the iPhone 13, or maybe a new and improved laundry detergent.
Exactly. Those tweaks and upgrades, they're important for staying competitive, but they're not usually the kind of thing that completely shakes up an industry.
Right. So what does shake things up? What's the next level of innovation?
Well, that would be radical innovation. We're talking game changers here. Think about the shift from, like, horse-drawn carriages to automobiles, or the invention of the internet.
Wow. Okay, those are some serious paradigm shifts. But those must be pretty rare, right? Not every company can just invent the next internet.
Definitely not. And that's why a lot of companies focus on what we call architectural innovation.
Architectural. Okay, I'm not sure I'm picturing that.
It's basically taking existing technologies or components and combining them in new ways to create new markets or disrupt existing ones.
Ah, so you're not necessarily inventing something totally new, but you're seeing the potential that others might have missed.
Precisely. Think about the iPod. Apple didn't invent MP3 technology or miniature hard drives, but they put those pieces together in a way that no one else had.
And created a whole new market for portable music players. I get it. It's like you have all these ingredients in your pantry, but it takes a creative chef to turn them into something truly special. So it's not always about being the first. It's about being the first to see the possibilities. But okay, so we've got these different levels of innovation. What else do we need to consider?
Well, you also have to think about what the innovation is focused on. Is it the product itself, the process of making it, or the entire business model?
Okay, those are some different angles. I'm listening.
So you've got product innovation, which is what most people think of when they hear the word innovation. It's those new gadgets, those flashy features, the stuff that catches our eye.
Yeah, it's all about the wow factor. The product has to be exciting, desirable.
Exactly. But you can also have innovation behind the scenes in the way a company operates. We call that process innovation.
So this could be like finding more efficient ways to manufacture something, or streamlining your supply chain, or maybe even coming up with a new way to market your product.
Exactly. It's not always visible to the customer, but it can make a huge difference in terms of efficiency, cost savings, and ultimately profitability.
Okay, process innovation. Got it. And then you mentioned business model innovation. That one sounds a bit more radical.
It can be. This is about fundamentally changing how a company creates and captures value. We're not just tweaking the product or the process, we're rethinking the entire business model.
Can you give me an example? My brain needs a concrete image here.
Think about Netflix again. They totally disrupted the video rental industry by shifting from a brick-and-mortar store model to a subscription-based streaming service. There's a whole new way of doing things.
Yeah, they didn't just change what they were offering, they changed the whole way people consume entertainment. That's
Yeah.
pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So, with all these different flavors of innovation, how does a company decide which path to take?
Oh, that's where it gets really strategic. There's no right answer, no magic formula. The best approach depends on the company's goals, its resources, the industry it's in. So many factors.
So it's like there's this whole toolkit of innovation options, and you have to choose the tools that are right for the job. No one size fits all.
Exactly. And it's not just about choosing the right type of innovation. It's about managing that innovation process effectively.
Okay, what does that look like? Give me the inside scoop.
Well, it involves generating new ideas, screening them for feasibility, developing the promising ones, and ultimately launching them into the market.
That sounds like a lot of steps. How do companies make sure they're investing in the right ideas and not wasting time and money on dead ends?
Well, it's a constant challenge, but there are some guiding principles that can help. One is to foster a culture of experimentation where it's okay to fail.
Yeah, failure can be a great teacher as long as you're willing to learn from it.
Exactly. Encourage people to take risks, try new things, and don't punish them if things don't work out.
So it's about creating a safe space for innovation to happen. What else is important?
Involving customers in the process. Get their feedback early and often.
Yeah, it's got to be customer-centric, right? If people don't want it, it doesn't matter how innovative it is.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to collaborate with external partners. Open innovation, it's becoming increasingly important.
So you're saying that sometimes the best ideas come from outside the company walls?
Absolutely. By tapping into a wider network of expertise, you can get a fresh perspective, accelerate the innovation process, and potentially come up with something truly groundbreaking.
Wow, so we've gone from dissecting industries with Porter's five forces to unlocking the power of dynamic capabilities, and now we're harnessing the magic of innovation. This competitive strategy thing, it's pretty intense.
It is, but it's also incredibly exciting because at the end of the day, it's all about creating value, solving problems, and making the world a better place, one innovative idea at a time.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today, a whole new framework for understanding how companies compete and win in a constantly changing world.
And hopefully they feel inspired to apply these concepts in their own lives, whether they're running a business, leading a team, or just navigating their own career path. It's all about being strategic, adaptable, and always open to new possibilities.
Awesome advice. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a fascinating journey. Until next time.